we're pleased to have my friend David Bailey from KPPB. You've heard from his partner Joel this morning, and we thank them for their work and their support in underwriting the whole day, for that matter. So David is, once again, I'm biased. I think he's one of the best IP. He's at one of the best IP firms in the area, and he's one of the best IP attorneys at the firm. So that makes you the double best, David. So no pressure. And I know they're very passionate about early stage technology and innovation. I know he has a great panel lined up. I'm eager to learn from this group of entrepreneurs, the good and the bad and the ugly. So with that, David, I'm going to turn it over to you and get things rolling.
Thanks very much, Andy. So I just wanted to welcome everyone and hope everyone's been enjoying the day. I have the great pleasure today to introduce you all to a group of very tenacious and fascinating entrepreneurs. And rather than engage in a long preamble here, I thought I would just quickly introduce each of our entrepreneurs and then give them an opportunity to speak to you all about their own backgrounds and their companies, and then from there we'll delve into some of the challenges that they've faced in attempting to commercialize their technologies. So without any further ado, can I please introduce you all to Professor Ruey-Kang Chang, who's the founder of QT Medical, Dr. Calum, who is a founder of SAFCELL, Tom Stone, who is the CEO of Sensorygen, and Professor Achuta Kadambi, who is a founder of Akasha Imaging. Ray, if I can start with you, let me just share some slides here, and perhaps if you could just walk us through a little bit of background about QT Medical and the research that you're trying to commercialize. Ray, you're on mute, so if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself, please.
Okay, now you can hear me. It's great. I said, thanks, David. It's a pleasure to be here. So my background is I'm a pediatric cardiologist, trained at UCLA. I've been working at UCLA for over 25 years. And now I'm still working at Harvard UCLA Medical Center. The journey started off my patients are little babies with heart disease, and I find it frustrating to do a electrocardiogram EKG on tiny babies, as you can see how hard it is. And there are no EKG machines designed for babies, so we take the machine that's approved for adults, designed for adults, cut the electrodes smaller and try to fit into the torso of the babies, and use all these long wires and cables and try to connect. And then the babies start crying and kicking, and you get terrible signals. So that's just not an ideal way of doing it. So this started about 15 years ago, trying to figure out a better way. And I connect with my engineer friends and figure out that there must be a better way of doing it. So we reduced, simplified the electrodes and lead wires, and then and make the EKG machine super, super compact. You can see on the right side, the baby is actually holding the machine, helping out with the test. So that's how we came up. And the company was founded in 2013. As we figure out a way to do it, we feel that we should commercialize this. And not only this is great for babies, this is great for everyone. So essentially, we can take this 100-year-old technology that's only available in hospitals and bring it to millions of homes. So now we have the EKG called PCA 500. That's FDA cleared and CE mark cleared, and we brought it to the market last year. That is essentially is the entire EKG platform. Started with the EKG recorder. That's the world's smallest ECG machine. And the electrode on the left lower corner, that's the integrated, patented proprietary electrode strip that has all the 10 electrodes in one piece, and everything is pre-connected and pre-wired. And the third on the right side is app on iOS and Android devices, both phones and tablets. So any smart device will be able to use to control the recorder and upload the ECG. to the HIPAA compliant cloud. So that's the cloud that we have. And finally, we add to complete the system, we developed the ECG diagnostics based on machine learning. So that completes the entire system that enables the patients to do their own EKG, medical grade EKG at home.
Thanks very much, Roy. Look forward to hearing more about the journey that's been involved in getting to there. But before we hear more on that topic, Calum, do you mind providing us a little bit more background about SAFCELL and the technology that you've been trying to commercialize for some time now?
Right. Yeah, so basically, for a very long time now, I've been working on a new class of proton conductors, first as a graduate student in Caltech, starting in about 1996, and then came out of Caltech about 2003. And in 2005, we started the first company that was generating a intermediate temperature proton conductor that we can use in devices called fuel cells. So that's where we put fuel into a box and we can get electricity out of it directly, no combustion. Or now we're also using them to take fuel into a box and get ultra pure compressed hydrogen out in one very efficient step. Like I said, we've been basically working on this now since 2015, and it's a very unique technology, like a lot of stuff that comes out of Caltech, very special. And sometimes when you call people special, you mean it takes a lot of work, right? So like a lot of technologies that come out of Caltech, it's a kind of real fundamental basis, and we've been developing it for the last 15 years, which is a pretty good track record for any of these kind of fuel cell electrochemical devices. And we're actually getting things into the market now.
All right, great. And we'll look forward to hearing a little bit more about that journey as well. Tom, you bring a slightly different perspective to the conversation today. You are a professional CEO who has linked up with a university researcher to help commercialize the technology at Sensorygen. Do you want to share a little bit of information about your background and the work that you're trying to do with Sensorygen?
Sure, be glad to. If you go to the next slide real quick, I can talk to that exactly. That's why I included this slide. Our Sensorygen's founder, Dr. Anand Ray, is a professor at UC Riverside. He's a Yale PhD, and he is expert in sense and taste and smell in humans, in animals, and in insects. And he has made a number of discoveries, and the most important being a mathematical computer platform that allows us to use AI to find natural replacements for toxic or harsh chemicals. And in this case, Dr. Ray founded the company in 2014, ran it himself with some part-time help, and then by 2017 decided that he wanted someone from outside to come in and kind of take the reins and really drive the boat, so to speak. And he and I had a colleague in that we both knew, and I was just finishing up. I had just finished up a previous startup, and so I met with Dr. Ray and came on board kind of as the full-time CEO in 2017. My background is I went to UCSD and studied nuclear engineering, worked for General Atomics, which is right down the street from UCSD in nuclear engineering, and then actually went back to UCLA and studied control systems and went into hardware and computer software, hardware and software development. Ultimately, I got my MBA from UCLA in '96 and started my first company in 2000. And so that was the early tablet device. I did another startup in MP3 players, and then I did a commercial UAV drone startup prior to Sensorygen. So this is my fourth time around. Through those experiences, I have a pretty deep network and a pretty big list of possible investors, people that are kind of in this area. Dr. Ray is able to focus entirely just on the science and the discovery aspect. And then I brought on someone else that I worked with at the drone company, Mark Lauer, who worked with me there. And we were a great fit and get along really well. And so I brought him along into Sensorygen. Go to the next chart. And real quickly, what we do is we use computational biology to discover natural compounds to replace harsh or toxic chemicals in everyday products. So believe it or not, companies like SC Johnson, Johnson & Johnson, Unilever, all these big companies read what everybody posts on Facebook and on social media, and they know that everyone hates all the ingredients in all these products that we're using, and they've heard you, and that's really where we come in. We work with huge companies. I mean, we're a little startup, and we're working with $70 billion corporations to find replacements for their ingredients that'll be safer and natural and not harmful to the environment or harmful to people. And so this area has been a huge boon to us. We're one of the few companies that are doing it on a full-time basis and dedicated to just this sort of a thing. So it's been an interesting ride working with with Dr. Ray. We've formed a great partnership and a great team, and look forward to talking more about it.
Great, thanks very much, Tom. And last but not least, Achuta, if you could share a little bit of background about Akasha Imaging. And it's great to have you on the panel because you are a founder who is trying to straddle, you know, keeping a foot in the academic world while running a startup company. So I'm sure that there will be many people today who are kind of interested in how you're juggling that. So thanks very much for joining, and if you wouldn't mind just kind of walking us through these slides to explain a little bit about what Akasha is doing.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me. And probably I'll echo a little bit of what Tom has implicitly said in those previous slides. So if we go to the next slide, we're an imaging company, and we're basically trying to solve deep tech problems where cameras can't see things. Now, this slide basically tells you what you need to know. It's not about a lot of things inaccurate. I'm no longer the youngest professor. I've gotten old in the pandemic, but really, it's the first line that's important, the CEO. As an academic founder, I think it's very important to have a CEO who's been there, who's maybe not starting his first company and is full-time, so can build an office and a team around. So I think as a professor, I think my strategy for commercialization personally is to find a backable CEO like our fantastic CEO, Karthik. So if we go to the next slide, what Akasha does is it basically tries to create these cameras that can see objects like household objects, things around you with unprecedented levels of detail by using essentially this kind of patent pending kind of optical technique. It's an ordinary camera, and then you have a filter in front of it. And that filter actually converts images like that tire into the image on the right-hand side. And if you look at the image of the tire, it's kind of this black object, black on black. And so it's almost impossible to see if there's a defect or a crack in a tire because it's black on black. So if you look at the Akasha camera, you're actually able to see that defect. Another class of objects on the next slide is shiny objects. Shiny objects like this metal engraving of a spoon, the Akasha camera is able to digitize this shiny object in 3D. And as some of you may know, scanning shiny objects is hard, but scanning mirror-like objects is a pretty hard problem. The market that Akasha is going after is essentially, if you look at things that are made, like your laptop, if you're using a MacBook, or your car, things that are made include some of these really challenging objects, like glass windows, or rubber tires, or sheet metal on a car. Actually, almost the whole car is made of these optically challenging materials. And if you can create cameras that can see that, you can teach factory robots how to see these parts so they can assemble them like Legos. And right now, our thesis statement is that's the blocker. Because robots can't see stuff when they're trying to assemble, they can't do stuff. And so Akasha tries to solve that problem, and we're fundamentally an imaging company that's taking that path forward.
Achuta, thanks very much for sharing that. So I'll kick off with you. In our own conversations in preparing for the panel, it was really clear to me that all of you share the opinion that team is probably the most important part of trying to launch any startup company. So I'm just kind of curious, how did you connect with your CEO and the other co-founders that you have been working with at Akasha?
So I think the way that I connected with my CEOs, many years ago when I was a first-year graduate student, maybe second-year graduate student, our CEO Karthik and I were presenting separate papers in the same session. So he was presenting this paper on PyCam, which was a pelican imaging, paper, and in the same session of the conference, I was presenting my, first paper as a graduate student. So we kind of connected there, through the panelists, actually, much like yourself, David, in this role. There was a panelist that essentially was introducing the presenters from the different speakers together. That's how we got each other's emails. The panelists connected us. And then he came and visited MIT, and we spoke there and connected on LinkedIn, and never saw each other for 3 or 4 more years. But then eventually we knew of each other and kind of reconnected. So I think what helped there is that there's a certain interface where we could appreciate each other's work. So it wasn't just, oh, let's start a business, let's make money. It was, okay, we appreciate each other's technical depth. And from that, we can, have a symbiotic relationship.
That's extremely interesting. Now, Calum, I recall that you attempted to engage in a similar search for a CEO early on and had a few more challenges. So would you care to kind of relate that story and some of the insights that you gained from that experience?
Right. So that would have been in the first company back in 2005. Back then we were newly minted PhDs, me and my partner, coming out of the same professor's lab at Caltech. We learned that's what they were calling us a little bit later. But they said, we need the third leg of the stool here, and that needs to be a professional CEO, which we completely agreed with, since, we recognize that, like you do any experiment in the lab, the first time you do it, you probably mess it up because you don't know what you're doing, right? So we didn't want to do that in the company. And we had an interesting experience where, basically we started kind of interviewing CEOs, and, one that we were working with, after a week of kind of discussing his salary and compensation package, we decided that probably wouldn't work out so well. And then later on, we got a letter in the mail saying that we had basically broke a verbal contract with him. So immediately going right into the deep end of kind of corporate law, in terms of like, I thought you don't have a deal till you have something signed. Well, turns out that's true, but then there's all the legal work can go in there as well. So
yeah,
we actually had a really rough start.
As I often tell our clients, Calum, you can be right, but you can't stop someone from threatening to sue you. That's for sure. So,
right, which can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah. So luckily, we had already found another CEO who was really a great fit, and I would say that if you're a graduate student or someone kind of coming out of the lab and you're going to start a company, you definitely want a professional CEO, and you want somebody that really understands that you need time to develop this technology, or maybe just idea, or God help you, science, into some kind of product. I think you definitely need somebody that's basically going to allow you the time to grow as a company, and as well as switching from doing research mode into kind of product development mode. I think Tom said it well, like he's allowing his technical team to focus exclusively on what they can do best, and maybe what they only can do. And I think that was a really key thing that allowed us to get a really great start in the first company, until it hit the Great Recession, and then we go on from there.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Tom, that's a great segue. So, I think both Calum and Achuta have spoken to the value of finding someone who's an experienced CEO to partner with. So how do aspiring entrepreneurs in our audience find you, given that you are already committed to another organization? What has been your process for partnering with technologists in the past, and kind of what recommendations would you have for someone who's looking to find someone with your skill set?
Right. Well, it's not that different from finding a husband or a wife or a long-term mate or a partner. This is a lot like getting married. When you have a technical founder and a professional CEO that you're trying to pair up, it is literally the dating game that is going on, and you need to find people. The most important thing is that they trust and respect each other. And just like in any relationship, that is really the core of it. And so you've got to find people that have similar temperaments and similar visions and understanding, and they get along. They just, I hate to say it, it's important that you like each other because you spend a ton of time together. And as I mentioned the other day in our conversation, things are going to go wrong. Things are going to be problematic. You're going to have a lot of stress put on you and your partner at that time. And if you have a nice, strong relationship, it's easier to kind of get through those hard times. And then you can really celebrate the good times. So the answer to your original question, though, is how do you find somebody? Network, 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 network. The best person you can find is somebody that you know, or somebody that you know well knows somebody else.
And if I recall correctly, Tom, isn't that exactly how you and your co-founder connected? It was a mutual friend who...
Yeah, when I was running the drone company, I had a consultant, an agriculture consultant, because we were working on farms, and he knew Dr. Ray. He was aware of him and knew Dr. Ray personally. And so when I wrapped up the drone company, I stepped out of it because it was already up and running. And then he put me in touch with Dr. Ray. And then I brought in Mark Lauer from the drone company that I had worked with. And then we brought in another PhD as a CTO that Dr. Ray knew. And we brought in another biochemist that I knew. And so our whole company and all the consultants consist of either people we know or people that we know who they knew. So we know everybody that's working with us really well and that they're a good fit.
Yeah. So Ray, I know that you grew up with your CFO, and so that obviously made it easier to locate him. But perhaps you can kind of speak to some of the challenges of having family involved in a new venture, both from the perspective as a member of the team. And I know that this was a topic that a number of you all touched on. The friends and family round that we hear about so much involves asking friends and family for money. And, that can be a complicated relationship. So Ray, I'm just kind of curious to hear how you've kind of navigated that during your time at QT Medical.
Thanks, David. So when I started that company, I had my technical collaborator, co-founder, a UCI professor. So we got the technical and medical part pretty well covered, but we don't have people who know about money or business. So that's why we were struggling. Initially, we and a technical team, actually, we end up actually got a pretty good technical team from UCI's Professor Chu's lab, and the PhD students graduated and actually all came to work for the company. So that's what we're lacking, is the financial and the business person to in the company. So we tried to recruit from outside and interviewed a few people, and really didn't work out that well. Was need to be someone who you can trust, and also someone share the same vision, the style with you. So it did trouble us for a while to find that person. Eventually, I have to convince my brother to step in. So I actually took me 2-3 years to finally convince him to join. And it wasn't easy for him to agree on, because he actually, from a financial background, he actually was doing pretty well in his own business, and to quit completely and join something that's completely new. And that was hard. But once he decided he was going to help, he was 100% in, and really that was the time that really we were able to gain a momentum and get things going. So, but that was great. That when you have a technical, especially medical device, you also have people who know about the medical, and then people who know about money and business. but of course that has challenges. And even with my brother being the CFO, a lot of times we have things that we don't agree with each other, and that can get into a pretty heated debate. And also in my case, that because we didn't hire a professional CEO, so for us to raise external money is harder. So that way that I stayed on as the CEO actually until to this point. So our beginning, we have to raise seed money all from families and friends. Because without a professional CEO or full-time CEO, it is considered a pretty hard sell to the VC. So our seed rounds and even A rounds, we have to raise from families and friends. So the challenge is taking money and getting your family involved, and something that actually started from me, and that's what I believe in. So a lot of times I get what I get from my brother or from my other family who are involved in the company or invested in the company is they feel that when things don't go well, they think this is all my dream, this is all what I started, and they got sucked into this. But when things go well, they're happy. They say, hey, great. Thanks for bringing me into this, and I enjoyed it so much. So it kind of, you just have to take it off. If you start this and get people involved, when it's successful, everybody's is part of it. But when things are going well, they'll come to you. So.
Yeah, so that's really great. I kind of feel from my own experience, everyone who wants to invest in an early stage company assumes that the return on investment is going to be enormous, and when you frame it to them that they should expect that they're going to lose all their money, and if there's any return on investment, that's kind of a windfall. They often are quite shocked by that. But I'm kind of curious for any of others of you who've approached friends and family to be investors, do you have any advice about how to do that and how to frame it in a way that doesn't cause long-term damage to those relationships?
Yeah, I think the approach I use, first of all, I'd like to come to Ray's Thanksgiving. I think it would be a wonderful holiday party and a board meeting at the same time. Yeah, the way I frame it is complete and upfront honesty. I tell folks that you have to assume you're going to lose it. If you ever see a dime of it again, consider yourself lucky. And this can't ruin our relationship. It can't ruin our personal relationship. You can't get mad and threaten me and block me off of social media and never talk to me again. This has to be money that you can walk away from, and that you're willing to partner with us though to see what we can do with it. And that's kind of usually how I present it to folks, and that's worked pretty well.
Yeah, in the first company, we it was kind of let's call it the late 1990s in terms of attitude. It was actually 2003, 2004, but people were still kind of super excited about this stuff, and fuel cells were hot. And so we said, well, maybe we should do a friends and family round, but not too much. All right, we'll limit it to 5,000 per person. That way, and we'll do exactly what you said, Tom. If you give us this money, just assuming you're never going to get it back, and you can't even mention it in the future. Like, you can never make me feel guilty. We can never be at a bar and you'd be like, you owe me a beer because I lost your. So I said, no, don't do that. We ended up taking like 30 friends and family. We had lots of friends and family, and then now you have 30 people, and there was lots of reasons why the investors were like, don't, when they saw that, like, you have how many, and it was just under the limit before you had to like declare some kind of public documents or something like that. And I'm eternally grateful for all those people that gave me the money. And now I have a kind of cloud of guilt, like, because I can't even remember exactly who everyone was. And that first company did go down, and we lost all that money. And I hope to resurrect one day that list and invite them all to a very nice party, and and fly them out to someplace nice to say thank you. But it was really stressful knowing that their money was involved as well. Especially when after that, a lot more money got put in, about $15 million. So, their money in the end, it was something where I kind of always felt that it was being held against us in terms of any negotiations that, like we had to protect them because that was our obligation. But then that really, hurt us in other ways when we were negotiating for ourselves. So it was really complicated. And yet, I was really grateful for everyone participating. I don't think anybody really holds this against us. And it was, kind of a nice show of camaraderie. But yeah, if you know that money can really get you to some place, then maybe that's a good shot. If you kind of know that you need a whole bunch of money, then maybe just hold off and put it on credit cards.
Okay, great. That's a fantastic insight. I'm just kind of curious. There's obviously a lot of people who are listening today who are, kind of flirting with the idea of launching a company or who are already actively involved in the process of fundraising. I'm just wondering, did you get any advice that was particularly helpful to you in the launching of any of your ventures, or having been down the road, is there any kind of pearls of wisdom that you wish you could impart upon your younger selves? Tom, perhaps you can kick off with any insights that you think would be helpful to share.
Sure. I think the biggest, best advice that I would give myself is and Calum's a great example of this, and that is persistence. Just don't give up, right? You've got to have a certain amount of drive and belief, and if you believe that it's the right thing and that it can help people and it's a great product, then you just got to stay behind it. And yeah, sometimes the years will click by and it won't go as fast as you hope, but you've got to stay in business to be in business. And you just got to be persistent and just keep knocking on those doors. And you're going to hear a lot of no's. You're going to hear a lot of you're crazies. You're going to hear a lot of you have no chance in hell of ever making anything of this. And but there's a good chance you can. And just continue to build your team, bring in investors that share your vision, and then do something meaningful with their money, right? Make those milestones happen and build that credibility, and then you'll raise more money and you'll hire more people and get more done. And if you stay at it long enough and hard enough, you'll probably be successful. It's just tenacity, perseverance, and grinding it out at the bottom line. So just don't give up.
Yeah, that's great advice. And just kind of riffing off a comment there about investors, Achuta, I know you've managed to bring in some very high-profile investors at Akasha. I'm just kind of curious, as a team that's managed to successfully raise, what advice do you have about timing and how to approach fundraising and the benefits of bringing in a high quality, very high quality investor like Coastal Ventures?
Yeah, so I think I think there's an element of patience to it, in the sense that the founders that I was part of, none of us had any urgency to start a company. We didn't have any rush to start a company. And so we were really able to get the technology to a point where it was mature, either through the university or also through customer discussions before. And we were able to simply just skip the angel round or friends and family round and go directly to investors for a seed round. And I think
sorry to interrupt, but I'm just kind of curious, how did you know, like for someone who kind of sat on the technology and worked on it, how did you know the timing was right for you guys to then go have that conversation? What was kind of the key moment for you when you said, okay, we're ready to go? Because I think that's really hard for a lot of startup companies to know when is the time right to go seek venture capital.
So I think, for us, it was, okay, is there enough customer interest in the raw technology where customers in different markets could see some potential? And we could see that within 12 months of discussions, we would be able to get a conditional purchase order. That's when we thought we would be ready to go for a seed round investment. So we spent about 5 months or so doing that process. And our CEO didn't take any salary at that point because he had no urgency either. And so we wanted to do it the right way in terms of raising from the investor. But let me turn that around and actually answer the second part of your question, David, which is, what is the benefit of having a top-tier investor? there were other investors who gave us larger raises or better valuations. But we decided to go for the investor with the deepest pockets and most name recognition. And that was, I think, the right decision, because when we talk to customers as a small startup, customers are pretty apprehensive about working with startups in general. And they're even more apprehensive if the startup doesn't have much runway. And no startup has more than a year in my field. Like, they're typically burning cash about 18 months or so every 18 months they raise a round. But when you have a tier one investor, it gives the customers the perception that, okay, well, this company can easily raise money because it's not like their investor's going to run out of cash. And if they've gotten a tier one investor, worst case, they can get a tier two investor maybe if they really need the cash. So it gives customers a sense of confidence to go with us as a startup and give us a sense of establishment. So I would highly encourage, especially coming from Los Angeles companies, trying to get established firms, tier one firms, get their backing, because customers are also international and they recognize international names. And if they're not in Los Angeles, you may have to go to Sand Hill Road to make it happen.
That's a really interesting insight. So, right, if I can ask you, I know COVID kind of sent your business plan for a loop. So I'm just kind of curious if you could give us a little bit of background on kind of how disruptive external factors can be, and any advice you have for any other entrepreneurs who get kind of blindsided by factors that are out of their control, and how you've been managing to navigate that.
Okay, great. I'm not mute. So yeah, we worked on the product for about 3 years and then got FDA clearance in 2018. But the entire platform wasn't completely ready. FDA clearance was on the device, on the electrodes, but we have the cloud and AI diagnostics. That wasn't ready until end of 2019. So 2019, end of 2019, we're ready for the market. And EKG, as you guys can imagine, is very widely used. So there's so many market segments we can get into. And if we choose the right one, then we of course they can do well with the low-hanging fruits and not to compete with the major brands like Philips or GE. So that's why we decided what would be the place that we bring the most value and the lowest hanging fruit to go with. At that time, actually, we're introduced to a company called MedAir, which is the largest medical service provider for the airlines. They own 75% of the market. They work with 160 major international airlines. So that was so great. So we discussed this MedAir extensively and decided to bring our ECG to the commercial airlines because that's a place we think that will bring the most value, because passengers with chest pain, they have to face a major decision to continue with the flight or divert to the nearest airport. And that decision can easily cost someone's life, or cost $200,000 for all the passengers to rebook. And we tested on airlines, United Airlines, British Airways was so great. So in January, we're ready to sell, and we actually sold 20 units to the airlines. I think they're still somewhere in the sky. And we actually made a round of production of 200 EKGs that are ready to go in. But then soon after COVID came, all the flights are grounded and the whole industry went down. So for a while, from March until June, we actually didn't know what to do. Thought that it's hard to sell device. We can't sell to the airlines, maybe we can sell it to the doctor's office. And then all the doctor's office were closed. Patients not being seen, and the salespeople cannot get into meet with the doctors. So that was a time we actually have to think seriously about what our moves should be. And we decided that actually our value is really is that this EKG enables patients to do their test at home. And especially in the middle of a COVID, no one wants to go to the hospital to get an EKG. And patients are seen by telehealth. And it's got hard to get an EKG by telehealth. So that's where we found that that's what the value is. And we should focus on that. And what we came up with instead of selling the device, because well, that's another issue is that because the device to sell to the patients could be costly, but the patients cannot afford. So we can just sell the test, which is the service. That's we created the service called Express ECG service that doctors will order the test and we mail it to the patient to complete the test and they mail it back. It took us a few months to get a service ready. We launched at the end of last year. And it turned out was pretty much needed service, especially in the pandemic. Patients wanted to have an EKG test. We actually have patients contacted us. They need an EKG service, but they don't want to go to a hospital. That's why they can get our ECG done. So launched at the end of 2020, and we're able to get about 50 doctors, office practice, and hospital to sign on, and over 700 patients already completed the test. So now we are raising money to expand that Express EG service. So my probably advice for people and me, of course, you can prepare all you need and spend all that time thinking of what's the best market, and all of a sudden things change. The best market will no longer be the market that you should go into. Then just stay focused, but at the same time to be flexible. You need to pivot your business and look at what's around you at that time to make the best decision and go from there. So we are able to luckily pivot our business in the middle of a pandemic, and we're still able to continue going.
Thanks for sharing that story with us all. I just wanted to flag for those of you who are participating that we've set aside most of the remainder of the time for your questions. So if you want to share those via the app, I think Steve will feed those into the Zoom chat for me, and I'll relay them to our panelists. But while hopefully you're all frantically typing out your questions, Calum, if I recall you had some really great words about the mindset that you need to have to be an entrepreneur, particularly when you're trying to commercialize, potentially early stage university research. And I was wondering whether you could just touch on that topic for us, because I thought that was really helpful.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely related to what Tom said about perseverance. But this is more of a sense of, make sure you know why you're, starting up a startup. Because, for in my example, I distinctly remember sitting in the office with our professor and my partner and thinking like, when we were saying, all right, we're going to start a startup. Okay, what will the name be? And after we decided on the name, I was thinking, I'll do this for 4 years and see what happens, right? All my parents were professors, so I was like, maybe then I'll go back into academia, and then it's like, okay, now it's 16 years later, and you asked me what would I tell my future, if I went back and told myself, I just appeared and said it's going to be 16 years, and you're still not going to know whether it really works out, in a big way or not. I don't know what myself would have said back then, but what I can say is the reason why I'm still at it is because of that core belief that this technology actually can make a big impact, in the world, in a whole bunch of different applications. And so, each time, and like I said, this is the third version of the company. Each time we get taken out by it, a global shift in terms of a recession or a pandemic, and there's an opportunity to pick it up again, I have to definitely think, do I want to do this, considering all of the ups and downs? And the answer is still yes. And that was, I think, what I was going with right at the beginning. It wasn't like, I'm going to do this to make a lot of money. That's kind of like that's a bonus. It's really the only reason they keep me going is that I feel like I need to keep pushing this because the technology has value, and I'm in a unique position to keep pushing. So make sure that you feel like that's really probably why you're doing this, or you've got a really good motivation. Otherwise, those hardships that you're going to find along the way are going to test you so many times that if it's for any other reason, you might just say, all right, never mind, in which case you've wasted a fair amount of time.
Thank you. And speaking of those hardships, we have a question that's come in. To the extent that you're in a relationship, how important is it to have your partner on board if you're about to do something crazy, like launch a startup company, and do you have any advice for kind of how to navigate that conversation? And I assume that that's a conversation that continues to be an ongoing conversation as the years go by.
Is this being recorded?
Good question. Yeah, yes, it is. So watch your words carefully, Cal.
I'll say a few words that decision is a joint decision between you and your spouse or your serious relationship, but you cannot go on the journey alone. So essentially, in my case, I pretty much dragged the whole family into this startup. And the family is not just your core family. Of course, your brother family, even my in-laws are in this together. So like my wife is a family physician. So after I started the company, actually she has to step out and provide a lot more, not just financially and everything else, and taking care of the kids. And I'm because I have a branch office in Taiwan. So during the day, I work here in the U.S. and once going to the evening, I started teleconferencing with Taiwan. So pretty much I work, there's no time off. So it's pretty hard. I mean, I work hard, but actually you want to understand that your spouse will probably work even harder, taking care of the family, bringing it to the family, taking care of the kids, etc. So it's been for me, it's been 7 years. Probably every few weeks, and my wife will come talk to me and saying, "Do you think this is the time?" So it's hard, and for me, and also because I mean, I my previous job is being a cardiologist, right? So. She would be interested if I want to go back to my old job and versus work much harder and getting much less for the running the company. So I think it is important that your spouse is fully on board and understanding, and also able to support a family in a case that things don't go as well as that you wish for.
That's a great observation, Ray. I got some good advice when we founded our firm that was like, working for yourself's fantastic. You get to choose what 100 hours a week you want to work. So, so does anyone else have any thoughts on kind of how to manage work-life balance and kind of relationships at work that they want to share?
Yeah, I mean, startups are hard. They're very much like, like your first child, if you don't have one already, in terms of it's just, it's like a crying baby constantly needing attention, and you have to figure out a way to kind of draw boundaries. Again, if this is being recorded, I know my wife would say that I don't do it well enough, but I do it better than I did at the beginning. But also at this point, having this lasted 16 years and starting effectively from grad school, and now having 2 kids who are older, I mean, it's I had to cut down what I could do because more and more responsibilities, as they came on. And so you're really growing with the company too in this way. And so you got to constantly reassess how much you can do, how much should you do, because you can always do more if you want to maintain everything. I wouldn't say in balance, let's just say maintain everything, Yeah, it's tough. It's not, the startup job is something where it's, paces, if you're coming out of academia, the pace is about 10 times faster. The expectations are, are 10 times higher. You actually have to make something work versus learn about stuff, right? And it just keeps going, right? It's there's always a new challenge. The second it's very much like a video game. If you you get to one level and you know, kill the master monster, you just open a door, and then next thing you know, you're like, great, now you got to scale it up, you know, now you got to make it super cheap. I mean, it just doesn't stop. So, you know, be scared and definitely talk to your partner. And even then, if it's your first company and you're fairly young, I don't think you'll know exactly what's going to happen. But just say that you're going to do it together and talk a lot, and then that'll help.
All right, great. We have a question here, which I think that I may not understand, but hopefully one of you do. My background's in machine learning, and I think Aaron Trewick, who's referenced here, is in the biohacking space, which is not an area that I'm super familiar with. But the question is, what would you recommend to investors or partners who are dealing with partners who have an Aaron Trewick type complex? And if anyone can explain to me what that complex is, that would be helpful, and feel free to answer that question. But if you're stumped on what that refers to, perhaps whoever submitted that question could clarify a little more. But, anyway, I'm going to throw it over to the panel. I think we might be stumped here. So let me just.
I'll bite. If I was going to wait and see if anyone else knew more than I do.
Jump in, yeah, please.
I am not an expert in this area, but my understanding is he represents a school of thought that in his particular case, that kind of the FDA approval process for pharmaceuticals is overbearing, overexpensive, doesn't help people, takes too long, et cetera, et cetera. All the criticisms you've ever heard leveled at the FDA and that process are embedded in that kind of concept. And that he was an advocate of bringing experimental gene therapies out quickly and untested, and in fact testing them on himself and others in his close circle, as best I understand it. And okay, so I don't know if Ray has any feedback on this himself, and his wife being in the medical profession and treating patients and understanding he went through FDA clearance. So Ray, maybe you could, if you have any thoughts on that, but that's the general concept as I best understand it. It gets a lot deeper and a lot more complex, but as a summary, I think that kind of catches the essence.
Well, I mean, you mean testing the product on yourself? For us, it's not a problem. EKG is non-invasive, so it's not hard. But if you're doing invasive thing, like you developing a catheter and end up having to use yourself, an employee, as an initial tester, certainly wouldn't be something that would be ethical, nor scientific way of doing it. But I mean, in our case, I mean, EKG, we do give it to our employees assistantly so they can get familiar with their product and testing on themselves, so they can, especially sales team, need to know everything about the EKG. So.
Yeah, I have a kind of interesting observation around this. I don't have a lot of experience with biohacking, but 20 years ago, I kind of made my career professionally guiding an entrepreneur who was intent on tearing down the copyright system and enabling people to distribute media over the internet. And you know, my advice to investors in that situation is, you know, you kind of just have to run with it and surround the person with advisors who can keep them out of trouble. That company wound up having a $1 billion IPO, and it was because it was the only company that wasn't sued out of existence by the studios or the recording industry. And I think the thing that really worked well for us there was just engaging in a frank conversation about, yes, these things are problematic. Yes, they aren't enabling people to consume content the way they want to consume it. But the reality is we can't get to the future that you want, which we were all enjoying every day during the pandemic, no doubt, of like having all of your content available on demand to stream without working within the system to a certain extent. And so, you know, the advice that I would give is like, buy into the vision and then talk about what are the steps along the way, what are the barriers that need to be broken down. If you're providing that entrepreneur with the people who can help them engage in conversations with the FDA, with the regulatory process to try and help advance their larger agenda, then that is going to help them see that you can be part of the solution. So obviously biohacking has health consequences in a way that, pirating content does not, but the implications for a startup company of engaging in any kind of activity that goes outside of a regulatory framework are the same. It's going to be the death of the company.
I think in a grander sense, if we kind of open it up a little wider, all of us and all of the startups that are listening today are moving into into new areas and expanding those areas, or possibly displacing existing players in those market segments in one way or another. And so I think to answer the question directly is I think either founders or investors who you have to find either if you're a founder, you need to find an investor, and if you're an investor, you need to find a founder that kind of has the shared vision, right? Like some people are only comfortable with a very small amount of disruption in a marketplace. Others want a large disruption, and some want to turn over society, so to speak, right? And upend society and culture. And so you've got to find people that have a like vision, I think. And if you run into an Aaron Trewick, you have to decide if that's your cup of tea, if that's the kind of position in this space that you want to sit in. And if you're comfortable with that and you believe in it, then great. If you don't, find somebody who is more in line with your kind of your comfort and your goals and where you sit in society.
So I think this question is, maybe I'll broaden it away from Aaron Trewick, because the way I read the question about investors or partners, that means the venture is already locked in. Like, you already have investors, you have a board, you have partners. The question I see is, what happens when you have a founder that you don't get along with, or whose values don't align with you, but you've already committed, right? You're kind of locked in, right, in terms of investment, corporate structure, and so on. So what do you do then?
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting conversation. When you've sat in my chair for 20 years, you've gotten to know a lot of founders who you've really liked that the board has removed from the company that they've founded. It always seems like a disappointing outcome. And again, I'm always a little bit of a spectator in these situations. You always wonder what could have been done to try and head off. And the main observation that I have is expectation management's really important, and don't conceal things from your board. I think there's this whole culture around board management and controlling information flow to the board. I've seen a lot of bad things happen in companies where the boards have a very high level of trust in the CEO, and the CEO is kept in place. And I've seen a lot of companies where things are not so bad, but the CEO has been concealing really important material information, or has sold investors on a business plan with no intention to execute on that business plan, but they knew it was what the investors wanted to hear. And those CEOs have been removed pretty quickly. So just to throw it over to the panel, I mean, do you have any kind of advice for where you've had an investor who, you didn't see eye to eye with, or a situation where things were not going so great and you had to navigate that with the board, and what advice would you have on that topic?
I would say you, as a CEO, you almost can't over communicate with your investors. There's probably a limit at where they'll start to tell you, okay, I don't need that much information.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I'll tell you, I have not hit that limit yet, ever, with an investor. Investors, I mean, they're bless their hearts. They go along the ride with you. They put their money behind you, and they'll support you as much as they can. And you can't give them more insight into the company than they'll take as much as you can possibly give. So I guess that's my piece of advice. Now, of course, you have to balance that. There's a lot of things that go into board management, and I hate that word to get a bad name, because I think you do need to manage your board as a CEO, right? You can't have an out of control board, just like you can't have an out of control management team. But you need to keep the two aligned well and moving in the same direction. And most of the time where things go off the rails is when key information is withheld or not disclosed in a timely manner. Bad news never gets better with time. So if it starts to look bad, tell everybody about it. And then if it turns around and it was a false alarm, well, so be it. That's kind of my advice.
Does anyone else have any thoughts? I'm conscious we've got one minute left. Just James King, thanks very much. He flagged that Citizen Bio is a great documentary on Aaron Trewick for anyone who's interested. Final question, yes, no answer. This is the bonus round. Calum, did you know you were going to be an entrepreneur from a young age, or was this something that kind of shocked you when the opportunity came up and you went for it?
No, did not know.
Yeah, you said.
Although I distinctly remember someone saying, "What are you going to do?" When I was in the undergrad, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to create the cold widget." And like, what is that? I don't know yet, but everyone's going to use it. So maybe it was there. I just didn't know it. Yeah.
What about you, Ray? Did you always think you were going to start a company, or was this?
No, it was an accident.
Yeah.
I got into.
There
I
you
thought
go.
I will grow old as a cardiologist and professor. So it was by accident.
Yeah. How about you, Tom? Serial entrepreneur. Did you know this from the crib, or were you?
I knew it from when I was about 16. When I was 16, I decided I would go into engineering, and I knew that I would then ultimately wanted to run a company, and after that wanted to start companies of my own. So I've basically just executed my plan since I was a teenager.
There you go. And Achuta, take us to the close. How about you? Were you a born entrepreneur, or was this something that you kind of stumbled upon in graduate school?
I grew up in Silicon Valley, so the answer is yes. I was privileged. My dad was an entrepreneur, so I saw the jobs that were created when he started his ventures, and I knew from a young age that that's what I would do. And I became a professor to become an entrepreneur.
So I was going to say, so becoming a professor is actually the shock in your case.
Yeah, becoming a professor is a little bit the shock.
There you go.
That was a good way to get really involved with the technology and stay current.
Well, certainly it's been great for UCLA that you decided to take that path. So we're all very appreciative of that. Well, against that backdrop, I noticed we've hit the top of the hour. So I just wanted to thank you all, Ray, Tom, Calum, Achuta. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I think the one thing that I came away with is you all don't have the time to spend an hour sharing your insights with us. So it's even more appreciated that you did, in fact, take that time. And I just wanted to thank everyone at the Alliance for providing a platform for us to speak with you all today. And Andy, I'll throw back to you to kind of close out proceedings. Thanks very much again.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Awesome.
David.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys. And thanks, David.